Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating investigation. We're going to respectfully challenge a universally accepted tradition about our food, and we're asking a pretty bold question about a pantry staple that, well, most of us consume without a second thought.
Yeah, it's a bit of a jarring question, isn't it? I mean, the natural assumption for most of us is that honey is obviously clean, totally natural, and completely wholesome. We see it on the grocery store shelves, glowing in those little plastic bear-shaped jars, and we just instinctively think of it as this pure, untouched gift from nature.
Exactly. But today, we're kind of putting those cultural assumptions on hold. We really need to look at exactly what happens inside a beehive, and more importantly, how the biblical text actually classifies what comes out of it. So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the core problem, move into the science of honey, then look at unclean swarming things, the mechanics of impurity, the real biblical honey, and finally wrap up with a practical path forward. Let's jump right into section 1, the core problem, which really boils down to death in the hive. To truly understand honey, we absolutely have to start with the physical and honestly somewhat jarring reality of how it's actually stored in nature. See, bees inevitably die inside the hive. And while undertaker bees do try to carry the corpses out, they simply can't get all of them, especially on cold nights or rainy days. What this means is that the honey develops in continuous, direct contact with decomposing dead bodies. It's a routine biological fact that every single beekeeper knows. Dead bees and developing honey share the exact same physical vessel system.
Which brings us to section 2, the science of honey. And the key here is that bees make honey. They don't just collect it.
Now, I can totally hear people raising a common defense right now. You might be thinking, wait, aren't bees just neutral vessels? Don't they just drink clean nectar and drop it off at the hive?
It's a very popular myth for sure, but science tells a completely different story. When nectar enters the bee, it actually goes into the honey crop, which is an internal organ right on the same fuel line as their own stomach. Once it's inside, the bee introduces its own digestive enzymes to fundamentally and biochemically transform that nectar well before it's regurgitated and stored.
So the forager bee returns to the hive and actually passes this liquid mouth to mouth to other house bees. It's a process called trophallaxis, and it gets repeatedly regurgitated, mixed with bee saliva, immune proteins like defensin 1, and an enzyme called invertase. Finally, it's sealed inside a comb that is literally built from the bee's own bodily excretions, beeswax.
So the crucial takeaway here is that the final product is not floral nectar anymore. It's a completely re-engineered, biochemically modified syrup. By the time it reaches a jar on your table, it is structurally inseparable from the insect itself. The bee doesn't just collect honey, it manufactures it.
All right, section 3, unclean swarming things, and how the Torah actually classifies all this.
So we've established the biology. Now we really must investigate how the biblical text classifies these specific insects. In the Torah, we encounter the Hebrew word sheretz, which refers to swarming or teeming things. But insects like bees carry an incredibly heavy label, sheketz, which translates to detestable. This isn't just a mild dislike, guys. It means they're completely rejected for the set-apart holy table. We see this explicitly in Leviticus 11:20, which commands, all winged insects that go on all fours are detestable to you. This categorizes bees perfectly. It cements the biological fact we just looked at directly to the biblical law, firmly placing the bee squarely outside the domain of biblical holiness. Moving on to section 4, the mechanics of impurity, or what we'll call the filter fallacy. You might be thinking, but surely, in modern times, commercial honey is filtered enough to remove dead bee parts and make it clean, right?
Well, not quite. Picture a cup of coffee. A paper filter can easily catch the coffee grounds, the solid particles. But you absolutely cannot filter out the caffeine, right? Because the caffeine is dissolved directly into the liquid. Honey behaves the exact same way. A commercial filter will catch solid wax flakes or stray bee legs, but it cannot remove the bee's dissolved DNA, its immune proteins, or its digestive enzymes. Those things literally are the honey now.
And that brings us to the strict mechanics of biblical purity. The Torah outlines a very clear, uncompromising system. When food or drink makes contact with an unclean dead body, like those dead bees decomposing inside the hive we talked about earlier, that food becomes irreversibly unclean. There is absolutely no filtration loophole provided in the biblical text. You just cannot wash or strain death out of food.
And this principle is confirmed beautifully in Haggai 2:13. The text asks, if someone who is unclean by contact with the dead body touches any of these, does it become unclean? And the priest answered and said, it does become unclean. This vital verse proves that impurity transfers by contact, period, end of story.
Which leads us nicely into Section 5, the real biblical honey, and understanding the word devash.
This naturally brings up the most crucial question, and I know you're probably thinking it. If bee honey is biblically unclean, what on earth is the land flowing with milk and honey actually talking about? It's a great question. The answer actually lies in the original Hebrew word for honey, which is devash. In the ancient Near East, devash functioned a lot like our modern English word syrup. It didn't automatically mean a product made by insects. It actually denoted a thick, sweet, concentrated plant fluid. Most famously, a syrup made by boiling down pressed dates, which is known as date honey. And this brilliantly illustrates just how consistent the text is. In every single mention throughout the Torah, devash is grouped with agricultural abundance, things like grain, wine, and oil. It's given as a first fruits offering directly from the soil. It is completely independent of bees. In fact, archaeological digs all across ancient Israel have routinely uncovered massive date processing installations, which confirms that date syrup was a total daily staple.
It's pretty amazing when you look at the historical record. Ancient historians like Josephus, prominent modern biblical scholars, and long-standing rabbinic traditions, they all agree on this. The primary honey of biblical abundance, that true sweetness of the Promised Land, was clean, pure date syrup, not the product of a hive.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 6, a practical path forward regarding obedience and abundance.
Realizing that bee honey is contaminated by the hive is a huge paradigm shift. I mean, it really is. But how do we apply this to our daily lives? The beautiful thing here is that walking in obedience does not mean scarcity. We don't have to just give up sweetness altogether. There are incredibly rich, perfectly clean alternatives available to us right now. You can use date syrup, also known as Ceylon, grape molasses, or even 100% pure maple syrup. These let us enjoy that sweetness without compromising the purity of our food. The absolutely crucial point is found right here in Leviticus 10:10. We are called to distinguish between the holy and the common, and between the unclean and the clean. Adjusting what we eat isn't about some rigid legalism. It's a tangible, daily expression of love and devotion to our Creator. It's exactly how we distinguish the holy from the common at our very own dinner tables.
It truly changes how you look at your pantry, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. We've walked through the messy biology of the hive, the sheer impossibility of filtering out that bee DNA, and the true scriptural definition of devash.
So we want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Having seen the raw evidence from the hive and the text itself, how will you approach your own table moving forward? We highly encourage you to test everything, dig into the scriptures for yourself, and align your daily practices with the Word. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. We'll catch you next time.